Hey everyone, welcome back to Main Deck. My name is Jordan, and I got a spicy Crimson Rampage deck with a awesome one check for you to check out. Hey everyone, how's it going? Today I'm going to be sharing with you one of the decks that I'm most enjoying so far out of the large handfuls of decks that I've made for Crimson Rampage that you'll probably see rolling out over the next couple months. But we'll start off with a set 1 character that I've been really jamming, partially because I wanted to play him for his interesting tactics, and also because I really like some of the shiny cards that he can play. So without further ado, we'll jump into it. It will be an ERASERHEAD deck. So, we'll start off with just explaining what ERASERHEAD himself does. He's a 7-hander with 19 health. Pretty squishy compared to the rest of the cast here. His health is under 20. Not crazy small, considering he is a 7-hander. But nonetheless, you got to really watch it. You will see you have a lot of tools to block, so it makes it a little easier. Being a 7-hander, you can naturally carry more stuff in your hand until you're ready to really jump in for the kill. And you're going to have a lot of cards in your hand most of the time when you play this deck, so you'll never be short of blocks. We have a nice spread of block zones, so you should always have what you need when you need it, especially after you get to game 2 or 3, and you really know what attacks to look for because you know what your opponent's going to be throwing, so you'll think ahead of time. So he starts off with a constant effect that actually begins before the game starts. You will search your deck for 1 copy of Erase and put it in your discard pile, and then you shuffle your deck. It is not a May, I don't believe. Yeah, it's not a May, so you have to do this, otherwise technically you're breaking the rules. And if I remember correctly, the way the sequence of events works in the living game rules, you do have to do this before you draw your opening hand and perform any mulligans. So it's kind of like you're really going off with a 49 card deck, because right out from the gate you'll already have this in the discard pile. He has 1 enhance where you discard 1 card. This attack gets +2 or -2 speed, and then you will add a copy of Erase from your discard pile into your hand. This is very useful in a million different ways, mainly because you can plus speed on your attacks. You can minus speed on their attacks, making everything easier to block and your stuff harder to block. And it puts Erase in your hand, which on defense is a 1 mid block. We might as well just go over Erase here because they're kind of hand in hand, which is why I have Erase already on the screen here. But it has a 1 mid block, so it gives you something to block or half block anything, and it has Breaker 1. So it's relevant on both defense and offense because both Erase and ERASERHEAD's other ability come into play when you use Erase, no matter whether you're using it for blocking or its effects. So that'll bring us to the response. He has response, commit ERASERHEAD after you play or block with an action card. Now it doesn't have to be Erase, so you can do it with some other cards we have in the deck, but you can always put this in your hand, so chances are this is what you're going to use. And then you get to draw 2 cards. So you basically commit, you draw 2 whenever you block or use an Erase card. And Erase is very flexible, specifically when you're talking about this ability, because Erase, as we go over here, has an enhance and a response specifically catered to ERASERHEAD. And with this blocking, enhancing, or responsing, it allows you to draw these 2 cards at multiple different junctures depending on when you might feel the need to. So it has an enhance, so during the enhance step you can then commit ERASERHEAD to draw 2 cards after using it, where you remove the Erase from the game, seal 1 rival asset or foundation. This lets you turn off all the important bits. If you're going in for a kill turn, it lets you turn off their wall clings. Anything else that's really going to give you trouble, give you minus damage over and over again. Or on defense, of course, it lets you shut off their most potent abilities on board. Really helps slow them down a little bit, give you that little extra edge you can need. And then his other one, ERASERHEAD response. After an attack is played, you or your opponents, your rival cannot play abilities on their character card. Basically, you seal their rival without sealing their rival. But it does only last for this 1 attack. You will discard it from your card pool after using this ability, so it does clear itself, so it doesn't mess up your blocks or mess up your attack strings or combos in any way. So it's very potent when you need, for example, let's say I'll use the easy one here. You're fighting Nomu and he has more than 6 health left, and you can pump the damage to kill him, but he has that nasty ability where he can just commit something and reduce it to 6. Boom, you turn him off for the attack. And keep in mind though, this is only during the attack, so once the attack finishes resolving, if I remember this correctly, their abilities turn back on. So if there's certain abilities that trigger after an attack has resolved, this won't stop those. But it still at least gives you the opportunity to both use an action card at the start of an attack before anyone can do something, or technically if your opponent's attacking, they'll get the response window first. But either way, it gives you a good point to stop them and maybe draw some cards if this is, for example, the last card in your hand, so you can draw blocks or, you know, draw the last little bit of attacks that you need to continue on. Kind of what I was talking about before, you can do it on block, enhance, or at the start of an attack to trigger off your draw. So it gives you the option to wait basically until the last moment when you decided, okay, I no longer need the +2, -2 speed, I need something in hand to solve this problem. Then you have erase here after you put it in your hand to make sure you do it. It's also very good use for the second enhance ability, because you think discard a card, kind of a big cost, I don't want to clog my hand with too many erases. Well, if you want to reuse it and you see yourself doing long attack strings, you just discard erase and then put erase back in your hand. So it's basically just +2, -2 speed and your hand doesn't change at all. But yeah, so these are the two things here that are going to be, you know, 4 of erase. Of course, I'll just go over that, and this is what Eraserhead does. So now we'll get into really the rest of the deck, starting since we're already here with the other action cards. So we got 2 copies of Plus Ultra. You can add more if you see fit, but I thought 2 was a good amount. I saw it when I really needed a clutch block. It's not as important because you always have access to erase unless all of them get removed. So you have a good block on hand. There are some times when the speed just gets out of control, and it's nice to have that Plus Ultra. It's also a decent momentum outlet. We have a couple things to do with momentum in this deck that are pretty potent, but sometimes all you really need is just that double speed or double damage to close the game, and that gives you the option here. The next one is Capture Evildoers, 2 copies. It does great work in this deck. In the tournament that I played, was one of the online tournaments. It actually came in so clutch, I used to have it at 1 of. I immediately changed it to 2. It does so much good work. It has Breaker 1, 1 mid block, so if you have it in hand on defense, it does stuff. It removes your rival's momentum, which there's a lot of decks going around that utilize momentum to help their loops by using like Meteor Storm and stuff like that. This stops them in their tracks and gives you a little fuel, and you don't need a lot of momentum to make the deadliest combo in this deck work, so this gives you what you need to really start firing off. And then if you really need to, you have a big long attack string, you can just use the form ability, discard 1 of those momentum, and discard 3 cards from your card pool. I personally haven't used it yet. I haven't done a ton of testing, but it's still a relevant ability. There's a lot of times in some games with other characters where, you know, you miss the check by 1 or 2. This will clear up to 3 out of your card pool, which will make that attack string that much likely near the end of the turn. So after that, we'll go to the attack lineup, because this is where things get spicy. I run 3 copies of Dropkick Slicer. I want to try testing 4 copies, just because it's so good. I like seeing it, particularly in this deck, because there's a very underutilized card that I really wanted to use. Part of the reason I wanted to play this deck as well, because Gutter Punk Elbow is a card that I've never seen really played and used, and I wanted to see what I can do with it. And Dropkick Slicer came out, and that is the perfect candidate for Gutter Punk Elbow, which we'll go over in a second. But first, for those who don't know it, Dropkick Slicer, amazing low block, 4 high for 5 damage, kick and weapon. And it has a constant effect. If you're less than 10 health, which you're at 19 health, you get hit once, maybe 2 times, you're going to meet that threshold. The card gets -1 difficulty, so that makes it a 4 diff for most of the game. Enhance, reveal the top 3 cards of your deck and add all attacks revealed this way to your hand. Discard all the remaining cards. Your rival loses 1 health for each card discarded this way. This effect cannot reduce them below 1, however. But then they still have, you know, a 4 high. Spoiler alert, with Eraserhead, it'll be a 6 high for 5 damage. So if you dropped in the 1, this makes it an immediate threat. And you'll be able to do this quite a bit. Of course, it's a 1 check. In most cases, I would say the Dropkick Slicer's one check is not worth its price tag, but in this deck, I make an exception because of the combo. The second piece to this combo is Gutterpunk Elbow. It is a fantastic high block, and it is a 5 mid for 5. With Eraserhead, it's a 7 mid for 5, which on its own is still pretty stacked. You'll be using it second most of the time, so it will be a 6 difficulty most of the time, which is a little steep, but as long as you have the 1 momentum to really get the fullest, it's going to go great. Combo enhance off of a weapon, important. Discard 1 momentum, add the first card in your card pool to your hand. The most optimal card, there's other ways you can play this as well. Almost everything else in the deck will have weapons, so you could use them on those, but you're wanting to open up the turn with a Dropkick Slicer into a Gutterpunk Elbow to pick up the Dropkick Slicer and replay the Dropkick Slicer. So assuming you can pull that off, which it's a lot easier than you might expect to pull that off, you'll get to essentially mill 6 cards, deal a bunch of damage, or grab a handful of attacks or some combination of the two. So just off of these 2 cards and 1 momentum, you're doing great. And there was a lot of times where I would build both my, like if I started first, I'd build hard 2 turns and just save these in my hand if I had them. And then, you know, half the time I went into a capture evildoers, I'd allowed half block purposely just to give them 1 momentum. So on my turn, I could capture evildoers the momentum on the Dropkick Slicer, play the Gutterpunk Elbow, pick up the Slicer, play the Slicer again, and draw handfuls of attacks, like I said, or just burn them for, you know, 5 to 4 to 6 damage sometimes, and it worked beautifully. And that was all before even, you know, the damage they possibly have taken from the Dropkick Slicer being cast twice and the Gutterpunk Elbow. It was beautiful, and I actually like really a lot how this worked out. So, on to the rest of the attacks. Those ones are definitely potent. Another good game closer, after you do that nice combo, is this bad boy right here. Blinding Cloth Capture. Amazing high block. Again, a lot of the attacks in the deck have amazing blocks. As we are 19 health, it is nice to have a nice plethora of good blocks. And I tried to keep most of the other good blocks at lows or highs just because we always have access to erase. But Blinding Cloth Capture. 4 low for 5. Mix up the zones, make your opponent really have to cover all their bases if they want to stop you. If you've used an action card this turn, which you most likely will, or even when you play this, you can just erase them just to make this live. If you play the card before it, whatever you're going to combo off of, you erase them just to turn that on, or seal something just to turn this on. We also have, plus Ultra and Capture Evildoers, which also turns this on. Gives it -2 difficulties. That's a 3 diff. Most of the time you'll be playing it as your 3rd, 4th, maybe even 5th card, but that makes it extremely likely that you can chain out to like 4, 5, 6, even 7 attacks sometimes, and you're still only tapping 1, 2, maybe 3 foundations. It's going to do a boatload of damage, or not a boatload, but it can do a boatload of damage. More importantly, it's a 6-speed low, which is hard to stop, and it's combo enhance. If you've played an action card, which you most likely will have, you get to make your opponent discard a card. Very powerful, especially like I said, if it's like your 3rd or 4th attack, chances are they've already blocked, they don't have a lot left in hand, or they're saving that 1 block for, the thing that might kill them. They no longer have that. The next one is Seal Arrival Foundation. This also is very good. Like I said, being able to just turn off an effect that was potentially stopping you, like Wall Cling or In the Typhoon, or, handfuls of other effects on foundations that are really potent and could maybe stop you or, cut you off just a little bit before you were winning. This stops that. And keep in mind, sealing is for the duration of the turn, if I remember correctly, unless it states otherwise. So this is turning it off for the whole turn. And that works even if it's not the combo enhance. So you can do that even if you're just throwing it out first. So you could throw out Blinding Cloth Capture, then Gutterpunk Elbow, because this is a weapon, and then pick this Blinding Cloth Capture back up, play it afterwards, and then the combo is live after that. So then you get to seal 2 things and potentially do the combo enhance as well. Very, very utilized card. This is also another card that I wanted to make a deck around. Until set 2, there just wasn't a lot of fuel for it to really make it shine, but this deck makes these 3 cards that I really wanted to use just go beautifully together. Also, I just realized we didn't go over the other enhance on Gutterpunk Elbow, which is also extremely relevant and really good. Enhance, cancel the next non-character ability your rival plays in the enhance step. More ways to stop your opponent from doing stuff to you. There were so many times where they would use resources on like the drop kick or just have most of their board tapped and they were just saving that one thing to stop, lower speed or do something crazy. And then I was just like, yeah, no, go ahead and do it and you'll waste it. Commit it or flip that for no reason at all. It'd be cool. So it stops them at least for this attack, but it's still good because you're throwing a 7 mid for 5 damage. So if they were counting on, -3 speed from some effect or -2 speed or minus damage to save them, this stops it or makes them waste the resources to really keep going. The next attack will be 2 copies of Blinding Cloth Assault. Now I will say these next 2, what are they at? Oh, this is actually the wrong amount. This is supposed to be... anyway, these are wrong. I'll have them corrected afterwards, but it's supposed to be 3 copies of Blinding Cloth Assault, I believe, and 2 copies of the Capture Net. But these 2 are just kind of filler. They fill all the combo requirements in the deck, and they do something that's at least semi-relevant. I will say in testing, Binding Cloth Assault had shown a lot more promise than I originally gave it credit for. I was able to dig for attacks just a little better on the turns that I needed it. But it could still easily be replaced in the future by some other, potential weapon combo attacks. It's not the end-all be-all. It's just solid in the deck. And same with Create Capturing Net. I was able to do some solid stuff with it, but it's by no means like a must-have. In the future, in set 3 and stuff, there's probably going to be something that replaces these. There's even a few in the sideboard that I'm going to potentially test out that I think might be pretty all right. Stains Paralyzing, Sinister Paralyzation is something to look at, but it's also a 2-check that's running a lot of really low checks, which I'm not a fan of. But anyway, Binding Cloth Assault. 3 mid for 5, combo weapon, combo enhance, discard a card, draw 2 cards. Let's say you have a bunch of foundations, or you're just not planning on using the erase right now and you can just pick it up when you need it. So you can discard that, draw 2 cards, potentially draw the last bit of gas you need, or some amount of blocks for the next turn. Really works well. If you've played an action card this turn, which most turns, you have the option to, at the very least, give it +2 speed. With ERASERHEAD, that makes it a 7 mid for 5. Same stats as a Gutter Punk Elbow without any of your foundation buffing. And that's pretty potent. 7 speed is not the easiest thing to stop, so there's a good chance you might get some fair damage at this as well. It has a 2 mid block, not that relevant just because we have mid blocks galore that are better than this, but it's still a mid block. It's not a +3 or 4, so it's usable. The next one will be Create Capture Net. Has a decent high block, too low for 4 damage. Combo Foundation, also a weapon, so you can do, Gutter Punk Elbow stuff with it if you so choose. But it has Combo Enhance. This attack gets stunned too. Very useful, and also lets you build a foundation from your card pool directly in. And we do have a handful of foundations that are relevant the second they get pulled down to use. So it's not the end of the world if you play this card in the deck. Like I said, it was more useful than I was expecting it to be, but it's definitely not great. Every time I see it, I just wish it was one of the other attacks, but it's not a bad attack by any means. And again, this was supposed to be 2 copies and this was 3. They're kind of interchangeable, so if you prefer the building and the low attack and the high block of Create Capture Net, by all means you could run it 3-2 here. Another option, like I said, is maybe pushing it to the limit, getting 4 dropkick slicers and cutting both of these to 2-2, or maybe just run 4 of one of them. Totally an option. Would not fault you for any of those options there. And with that, we will go to the foundations. So our foundation lineup will be Mediator at 3 of, Enhance, Destroy your rival's attack at -3 speed. If you played an action card, most likely you will, you get to draw a card. Great for helping stop attacks. -3 speed is huge. You do have to destroy it, but we have a lot of quick build foundations, and since we are more defensive sometimes until we get them into kill range, it's not a problem that you do this. You can also just use it on your turn if you really need to draw a card. We have a couple different ways to see what the top card is. So sometimes you'll just be like, yeah, I'm just going to draw the top card, and it's hopefully something that I need. But again, it's also nice to keep you out of deadlock if you're getting there. It gives you some relevant effects, and you can do that. We also run 2 copies of Night Watch. Being unique, 2 copies I feel is the perfect amount. You'll see it fairly regularly. You'll have plenty of action cards for its response, which is remove it from the game, remove 1 action card from your discard pile after your opponent plays a non-character enhance and cancel it. Same with all the seal effects. There's a lot of stuff in the game that can potentially stop you from winning or start a chain reaction that gets you killed, and being able to just tell your opponent, nah, don't do that, is nice. It also gives a little bit of deadlock pressure with the form of add 1 combo attack from your card pool to your hand, which if you do get it out, you can drop kick Slicer into Gutter Punk Elbow to put Slicer back in your hand, and then use this on the next cast of drop kick Slicer to put Gutter Punk Elbow back in your hand, and then do it again if you have another momentum. Kind of funny. Then we have 3 copies of Floating Around with My Babies. Great spam foundation. Remove the top 3 cards of your discard pile and it gets 1 damage. Lets you pump up the damage. I can commonly get 1 to 2 of these on the field. Sometimes I can even get all 3. Being an easy to build foundation, it's really nice. Gives you free damage basically. Really pumps up a lot of these to the deadly range. Most of our attacks are, actually all of them are 5s except for the Create Capture Net. So giving it, 1, 2, or 3 really is pumping the damage up there, which is nice. The next one is 4 copies of It Can't Be Fixed, another spam with a fantastic block. It's Stun Hate, works really well on anyone who wants to try to use stun. It helps you build a little faster, but it's got a great block and is a spam foundation. We got 2 copies of Zoom. I might think about upgrading this to 3 just because it's all response after your combat phase begins. Reveal the top card. Being as we run 1 checks, we want a lot of ways to make sure we know when the 1 check is coming so we can plan accordingly, which is why half of the rest of these cards are based around that. So you get to look at the top card at the start of your turn. So if you have the drop kick Slicer, you're throwing a 5 out there, you at least know if the drop kick Slicer is going to pass. It also has a deadlock form to look at your rival's hand. Doesn't happen a lot because most people don't go to deadlock, but it at least lets you know the knowledge ahead of time so you can maybe cater your attack strings accordingly. 3 copies of Late Riser. This one has a response when it's discarded from your hand during the enhanced step to give the attack +1 or -2 speed. It's a great option with Eraserhead because you have an effect that lets you discard a card to grab Erase. Sets up a good block when you grab Erase because it'll give you that 1 mid block with Breaker 1 and gives you that little extra speed hate, or if it's on your turn, gives you that little extra speed increase. It's also a nice spam foundation with more damage increase. If you played a combo ability this enhanced step, you get +1 damage. Everything but Dropkick Slicer has some form of combo ability that we're most likely going to be capitalizing on. So this is an excellent addition. It helps whether it's in your hand, on top of your deck as a check, or on the field. Really all around good. The only time you don't want to see it is blocking for low block. Not the greatest, but you can always just discard it for speed hate and then grab an Erase and half block it really easily. Or full block it if it's a mid. Next one, we got 4 copies of Destined for Mainstream Success. Great spam foundation, and the main reason it's in the deck is the flip. Name a card type, reveal the top card of your deck. If it matches the name type, add it to your hand. You always want to just call attack every single time. The main purpose for this is to either draw the attack to get it off the top of your deck, or at least see what the check is next. See if it's a 5 or 6 check, or I think 4 check. I think there's 1 or 2 4 checks here we have. No, never mind. Okay. Basically, you just want to get that attack, get that orange off the top of your deck into your hand, or have the sound knowledge of knowing your next attack will have a 5 check or higher. That's the main thing for this. Celebrity status. We have 1 copy. I've debated about just cutting this completely for, another copy of Zoom or something like that. It's a spam foundation. It's flip, add 1 momentum to the top of your deck. The main reason I was toying with this is because there's relevant cards that'll hit, such as Dropkick Slicer or Gutter Punk Elbow, because they will be quite fast, and some of them in your long attack strings will hit. And being able to just stack them on the top, considering we have a handful of ways to draw the card, it lets you guarantee that you'll draw an attack. The main reason I might cut it is just because the Gutter Punk Elbow is so potent that most of the time I want to just save my 1 or 2 momentum to do that as many times as possible. But if you're in a game that's you just have, hit attack after attack, your opponent's most likely almost dead anyway, and you don't really need it. But that's why it's here, and that's why it might get cut. The last foundation we have is Specialist of Sound at a 4 of. This is another reason, or another card that helps us make sure we see the 1 check coming as soon as possible. The main reason it's here is after this card is revealed, or after this card is checked, you'll reveal the top card of your deck, the next card that you would be using as a check, to just reveal it. You'll know if it's an attack, you'll know if it's a good check, you'll know if it's the dreaded 1 check, and if it is the 1 check, you can just draw it with Mainstream Success or your Mediator to just get it off the top. And its other response also is quite relevant in the deck, funnily enough. Commit after the attack is played, it gets -3 speed. We already have -2, but giving a particularly hard to block attack or an attack that might kill you, -5 total. Really good. Makes it quite easy to block, even if you've already blocked like 2 to 3 times in a turn. And that brings us to the end of the main deck here. We're going to do things a little differently. The side deck we're actually just going to have as a Patreon exclusive. If you guys want to see the rest of this, the side deck, and again, I've mentioned this before, my side deck isn't a true side deck. It's more just cards I consider for the deck, or cards that, you know, I'd suggest if you wanted to make some adjustments, cards that I was looking at that might be potential best in the slot. I just need to do some testing with them. But just to keep the video a little bit smaller and keep my rambling to a minimum, we're going to have that bit just be over on Patreon. If you want to see that, go ahead. There'll be links all over the place for it. You can check it out and check out my ramblings. Here you can at least see the cards I was considering, but if you want my big take on why they might have a place in the deck, you can go ahead and check that out. So that brings us to the end of this part of the video. Speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank all our patrons for all their glorious support, and we hope to see you guys in the next video. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you guys test it out and maybe make some adjustments for yourself. Go ahead and let me know in the comments if you think this is an exciting deck. I certainly do. And you guys have a great day.